when I won at the St. Johns River a few weeks back, a lot of people were saying, hey, Bill, was you using forward-facing sonar? Was you catching them on forward-facing sonar? Obviously, I wasn't. You know, you saw swimming a jig, flipping a jig, power fishing techniques that I'm kind of known for. But what I was using Mega Live 2 for, and I had it on every single day in that creek, then, you know, the creek was called Deep Creek. And that creek for Florida was very deep. You know, it had some water in there at times that the boat was sitting in 25 to 30 foot of water, okay? And for a creek in Florida, that's really deep water, okay? So what that creek had in it was, it had a lip or a shelf in it, or a mud flat basically, but it would come out off the bank about 10 feet and it would drop off into, you know, 20 or 30 foot, okay? And there were key isolated pieces of cover on that lip, okay? And what forward-facing sonar or Mega Live 2 did for me was let me keep the boat positioned where I didn't get up on top of that cover, okay? Like I said, I had it on all the time. I'd pan over to the lip, find those isolated pieces of cover, and on the first day, when I was flipping my black and blue jig, I caught a lot of those fish on those isolated pieces of cover that were sitting on that lip, okay? There was also in that creek a lot of what I call channel swing banks, okay? Y'all watched me catch a lot of fish off the base of trees that were sitting right against the water, and some of those trees had 10 or 15 foot of water against them, okay? And what I could do with that Mega Live 2 was I could scan around on those banks, on those channel swing banks, and see exactly where that deep water. So I was not necessarily looking for fish at that point. What I was looking for was deeper water and isolated pieces of cover. So basically taking a new piece of technology, working it into that old school pattern, and it definitely helped me at the St. Johns River, okay? So like I said, I'm taking forward-facing sonar, Mega Live 2, working it into my style fishing, that shallow water style of fishing. You know, look, fish don't read the same books we do. So just because Bassmaster Magazine or Bass University tells you that's how it needs to be done, sometimes that's not the case, okay? If you're using forward-facing sonar, you don't necessarily have to be out there in the middle of the lake. Take that technology, get to the shore, find those isolated pieces of cover, look for those brush piles around docks. When you see those fish sitting by that cover, pitch a jig, throw a crankbait to them, slow roll a spinnerbait. You don't need a minnow to catch fish. Take forward-facing sonar to the shallows, and I guarantee you it's going to put a lot more fish in the boat for you. You know, when it comes to fishing or fishing a piece of structure, I'm probably one of the most anal anglers out here. And what I mean by that is when I pull up to an isolated piece of cover, whether that be a laydown or a dock, whatever that piece of cover may be, if I feel like there's 10 fish on that piece of cover, I want to catch at least 9 of them. Okay, so in the past, you know, and I hate saying old school techniques because it ain't old school. This is just fishing, right? When I pull up to a piece of cover, and I'm gonna use a big laydown for example, okay? We know it's got big branches on it coming off, little branches. We got what I call the heart of the tree, you know, the main part of the tree. What I've always tried to do in my whole career is what I call catch the loose fish first, okay? And what I mean by that is I catch the fish that are on the outside edges of the limbs, okay? I've never been one of them guys to pull up to a piece of cover and go for what I call the heart of the cover, okay? And the reason I don't do that is because if I go to the heart of the cover, whether that be a dock or a laydown, and I catch a fish back there and I drag him through all them branches, I may have just ruined 3 or 4 extra bites that I could have got, okay? So I always start on the outside edge and work my way to the heart of it, okay? I always try to catch those loose fish first, and then get the ones that are buried up in there. You know, there's a tremendous amount of videos out there of me catching 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fish off of one dock. You know, and like I said, I've always been anal about every piece of cover that I approach, okay? The next thing to take into consideration when you're approaching a piece of cover is the angle and the cast that you're making. It does no good for you to just haphazardly throw in there and not get the right angle, because it doesn't do you any good if you get that bite and you can't get that fish out of that piece of cover. So to me, angles are very important. If you have to get the boat in a different position, make sure you do it. You know, I'm a big fan of always bringing my bait parallel with a piece of cover, whether it be a laydown, a dock, whatever that may be. But pay attention to your angles and start on the outside edge and work your way in.